Hello, I'm Peter Kieseberg. I'm head of Institute of IT Security Research here at the University of Applied Sciences St. Pölten, called Smart Work Clusters. The idea was that we have one side we have home office, on the other side we've got working in the office, and both have their benefits and the drawbacks. And especially for people who live in small flats and who might be more in a rural area, both commuting is problematic, but also working from start at home can be a burden. For example, if you've got kids and so on. So the idea was to have work clusters in rural areas where people can commute to, just a short commute, and there everything is provided for them. And of course, we're a security institution, making it secure, talking about data security and privacy and all this kind of stuff out of the box. That was actually the idea. Well, I have to admit, we had this idea a bit before Corona actually hit us. So remote office was not really possible in a lot of companies, was also frowned upon. But we still believe it can be really beneficial for people who, for example, don't have the working place. We have to do a lot of phone calls. We have a lot of co-workers who say, well, working at home is a burden because both they and their clients, for example, have to have a lot of calls. They only have like 3 rooms, one being a bedroom, and this all gets very crampy. Furthermore, if we're talking about sometimes a bit more specific jobs, it would be nice to, for example, have like things like printers or other shared environments, shared equipment that's hard to come by, which is often not feasible at home to have at home. Well, that was the idea. The idea was actually, as I said before Corona, having this, removing actually the amount of commuting time, reducing this commuting time, because we see also in our timesheets how much time every week is wasted actually on commuting, and that's dead time in the end, often. Especially, and we know that, or let's see, in the pandemic, we have seen that working remotely has been accepted, increased acceptance in actually virtually everywhere. But still, we also heard a lot of people complaining, for example, that full remote work is not possible for them, and then some middle ground would be nice. So being away from, for example, the kids, but not being away too far, being like 10 minutes away instead of an hour. And this would greatly support them, having on the one side a silent working place, and on the other side being able, for example, picking up kids from kindergarten and doing this kind of stuff, which is easily possible if you only have 10 minutes distance with a car, for example, instead of an hour or more per way. So no, actually not much changes, but I think I think that the acceptance of such a approach has increased significantly due to Corona. Closer to their to their home place, but on the other hand, a professional environment that is silent, has professional desks, professional chairs, which is good for your health, where you can we have the ergonomics of a working place, and also the ergonomic rules and the health rules of a working place. So the benefits of working place and the benefits of being close at home. That's actually in a nutshell. First of all, it needs to be work that can be done remotely, but in the pandemic, we have seen that lots of things can be done remotely. So I really see an increased potential here than compared to what we saw before. But of course, there are things you can't do remotely. Next thing is, of course, that you don't have all your coworkers around. So this whole chat that it's informal, formal information gathering is still the same like in the home office. Again, we have seen all the downsides of this during the last years. So I think we can also know how to cope with it. It's certainly nothing where I say I will do it 100% of the time and and only being remotely in these classes. But it's like remote work in the end. It's downsides of the remote work that of course apply for several things here, like for example, not knowing the typical informal, not getting the typical informal information. Actually, I think this is the most important part. Second is kind of be, of course, in some, there might be high risk environment, high risk jobs where you simply can't do it because it's not, you still never can guarantee the same security. And of course, there's also sometimes rules and regulations that have to be followed, where it's simply said you have to be on the premises in order to access something, but then it's simply not doable. But yes, this is, I guess, the major drawback. The major drawback is the social drawback from home office that we inherit from home office. Even before pandemic, we've seen people in the tech sector wishing for or longing for, let's say, an environment where there's that's less urban. So there was quite some people interested in the tech sector moving outside of big cities to a more rural community. The problem being that commuting time just skyrockets, and especially that commuting is then simply only possible by car, because the buses go very bad, and it's rural environments. So the idea was, with these work classes, we could bring highly paid jobs to rural environments, because the commute will be reduced to, let's commuting to this work cluster. You have like-minded people there, you have shared environment there, you have all the infrastructure you need there, and you only commute once per week, for example, to your real office, thus making areas where there's currently which are currently simply too remote, interesting for workers. And we have some areas in Austria where people move away. So we have this issue in some of the areas. For the location of the class, I think it's quite simple, because in order to be able to establish such a cluster, you need a high-speed internet connection, you need all this kind of stuff, else you simply can't set up the cluster. So of course it would be, it could be possible to just get into this fast connection to the cluster nowhere else, but it would be, let's say, an incentive to also get more technology into the outside areas. Yes, I think that's the major drawing. In addition to drawing people to rural areas that actually require and will buy high-tech equipment and fast infrastructure, thus making a market for fast infrastructure in rural areas, thus making providers come to these areas and actually invest there. Because of course, for private invested money, this is always a question. You can't invest a lot of money into bandwidth in areas where they are certain they won't make a business. I think that's can't really ask for this too much. For example, software development, especially I'm clearly aware that in software development, you of course have to have contact with the customers, contact with the coworkers. So like I said, it's not a 100% remote solution, but for a lot of time, you actually will simply you will have to focus on your coding. And this, for example, something that could be done in such a remote work cluster. Software development, maybe some kind of design things, a lot of IT jobs I expect actually. I think the main question is if it's still, after everybody now has a full set of home office work tools, if it's still a valid idea, it's still an idea that's warrants execution, or if we can just say, oh well, let's do home office. And honestly, I don't know. I know a lot of people. We all have all the tools at home now. That's true. But on the other hand, I know a lot of people who are really longing for getting away from home. So I still think this applies. But I'm not sure if these people are not now at this exact moment longing for the working space. So I think now there will be a huge trend towards really going into the working place, because it has been so long for many of us, and now it's actually there's something new again about this. So I'd say now might not be the ideal point for this idea, time for this idea, but let's give it a year, and then when the commute gets again hurtful, then we'll do this.